Hello and welcome to an on-time Heart Standard this week. My name is Craig Cairns, and in the absence of Joel Sked, we have Blair Meikle joining us today. How are you doing, Blair?
I'm very well, thank you. I won't make any comment on the fact that we're on time when Joel's not here.
Yeah, exactly. That's a common denominator. It has been my fault a few times, though. As people will have seen from the thumbnail, we are slightly on the theme of it being an international break. We are going to talk about whether or not the two Hearts representatives, Lawrence Shankland and Craig Gordon, will get any game time. We'll take those in turn, and they will also have one eye on Hearts' next game, and that's a week on Sunday against Aberdeen. And we will look at, on the back of Craig Halkett being suspended and his comments going out this week, we'll look at the options that Hearts have to replace him. But just before we do all that, thanks everybody for joining us. Please get your comments in. We'll try to get as many as we can, and please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. If you like what we do, please head over to heartstandard.co.uk, or you can download our app. We believe the app is the best way to enjoy our content. And finally, Heart Standard is brought to you by S1 Jobs. If it's time to hand in your transfer request, then head over to S1 Jobs and upload your CV today. With thousands of jobs across Edinburgh and the surrounding area, you'll find the one at S1 Jobs. Start your search today. Right, as I said, we're going to look at the two Hearts representatives in the Scotland squad and see what the chances are of them getting any game time. I think it seems quite clear to me that one will and one won't. We'll start with the one that I think will, and that's Craig Gordon. I don't know if you disagree with any of this at all, Blair, but Scott Bain has been called up. I can't see him sort of jumping the queue, if you like, to go from out of the squad to first choice. I think that makes it a toss-up between the other two. And I think that similarly, without much game time recently, Liam Kelly and Craig Gordon. And I think, I don't know. I just think Craig Gordon's probably still the better goalkeeper, even at his age. And what seems to happen quite a lot in Steve Clarke's squad is that he's played more recently than Liam Kelly for Scotland.
Yeah, I think the general consensus seems to be that most people are expecting Gordon to play, and you can obviously see why. I think whichever option Steve Clarke goes for, you're kind of almost throwing them in at the deep end with the fact that it's either Gordon and Kelly both haven't played, and Scott Bain's not played on the international scene for a long time. He hadn't played much before this season for Celtic. He's now playing for Falkirk, obviously. So I think in that circumstance, you want somebody who you know you can rely on to throw into that scenario. And I think from the three, Craig Gordon's the one where you really would be feeling like you can do that. You'd feel confident putting him in there. So I think for that reason, he's probably front runner to play. Also, the fact, as you mentioned, he's probably the best goalie out of the three. So everything else being equal, when you're weighing up the fact that him and Kelly both haven't played, and the fact that Bain's coming in late, and as you say, not probably going to jump the queue. If it's a toss-up between Gordon and Kelly, who both haven't had game time, it just comes down to the fact who's better and who do you feel confident you can rely on in a high-pressure situation. And yeah, it would be Craig Gordon.
Yeah, and part of that's the experience as well. He's been there and done it at this level more than Liam Kelly has. And talking about the lack of game time, does it matter? I mean, it definitely doesn't matter as much for goalkeepers, but does it matter? I mean, it's quite a long time that Craig Gordon's played a first team match. I mean, it's only in the recent past that he has been even available to play first team matches again. So is that an issue at all? Or, I mean, goalkeepers spend half their time standing about doing nothing anyway.
I mean, I think it matters. I don't think you can completely discount it. But as you said, it probably doesn't matter as much for a goalkeeper. There's still that element of like sharpness, even for a goalkeeper, which comes with playing games and everything. But if it's not like he's just coming back from injury and he's not played. He has been fit for a period of time, and he's been training and everything, and he's played bounce games and stuff. So you're not worried that he's just not fit from being injured. not sharp from the being injured point of view. It's more just not playing. So, and then obviously he's been training and everything to a high standard, and will have been since he's gone away to the international team. So I think, as I say, I think it does matter. I think ideally you wouldn't have that scenario where you have to pick a goalie that doesn't play. But I think we can again be confident that Craig is the type of guy who can deal with it, and he will be in a sort of physical condition where he's sharp enough, I think, to get through it.
And let's hope that he doesn't have too much to do anyway when it comes to the next couple of games. Lewis Lennox says everybody still rates Gordon highly from all other Scottish clubs fans. Liam Charles, he just says, afternoon, gents. I didn't mean to bring that one up, but I'll read it out since I have. And FG says, no doubt Craig is the best out of that lot. Insane that Hearts' second choice keeper is Scotland's number one. Let's go on to Lawrence Shankland. Maybe a bit more of a difficult question to answer, whether or not he will get game time over the next couple of matches. What's your thinking of it before I throw my tuppence worth in? What's your thinking about how Shankland will fare over the next week or so?
I think we can be pretty certain that he won't start either of the games. I think Steve Clarke is more likely to go for Shea Adams or Lyndon Dykes on the start, and then potentially, even if it was to go through a curveball, it would probably even be George Hurst. So I don't think Shankland's in the running to start either of the games. And then in terms of if he comes on, I think it just comes down to how the game goes. So like if Scotland are leading in Greece on Saturday night, you've got a comfy lead, they don't need to bring anybody on to score a goal, then he probably doesn't get on. But then if it's obviously Scotland need a result, at least a draw from the game. So if it's headed into the last 10 minutes or so, and it's 1-0 to Greece, for example, then he potentially would be the striker that Steve Clarke would turn to. Clarke said that himself in the past. If you need a goal, Lawrence is your man. Exactly. We obviously know it from watching Hearts, and Scotland fans know it as well from was it the Georgia one where was it a Georgia qualifier? He came on and scored that really late header. So
was that the one? That's what I was thinking. I didn't remember it as Georgia, but I couldn't remember the team. You could very well be right. Was that the 2-2? He came on and scored a late goal and made it 2-2.
Something tells me it was Georgia, but I'm not 100% on that. But yeah, so he has shown it even in a Scotland shirt that he can be that man to rely on to come on and do that. And then heading into the Denmark game, again, Scotland are going to need to win that game. Well, if they want to top the group, that is. So again, if it's even heading into the latter 10 minutes or so, and it's 0-0, say, or 1-0 to Denmark, then again, there's a high chance Shankland will be that man he turns to for the last 10 minutes to try and come on and get a goal. Again, if Scotland are in the lead comfortably or whatever, which is unlikely, but if they are, then it's probably a Dykes or a Hurst he turns to come on and maybe just hold it up and stuff. So yeah, it just really just depends on how the two games go, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I agree that I don't think he's definitely not going to start against Greece. I totally agree with you. Even from, I was going to reference the quotes as well. I think it was just after the Scotland squad was announced that Steve Clarke mentioned if you need a goal, then he's your man. Obviously, these are two crunch matches, whether or not Scotland will qualify automatically or not. And yes, what you're describing there is exactly the scenario. I think he could come on against Greece if Scotland are chasing a goal. I think it's less likely he comes on to help put the game out of sight, as you say. But I do think there is a scenario where he comes on when Scotland are chasing a goal, or potentially if he sees if it's 0-0 or 1-1 or something like that, and he smells blood and senses a winner, then maybe there could be that scenario as well. And I think that there's an outside chance that he could score a goal in Greece coming off the bench and then maybe get a start against Denmark. But I would still agree with you that even in that scenario, I think it's still unlikely he would start against Denmark because, and this just kind of sums up everything that you've said in one sentence, is that there don't tend to be too many surprises when Steve Clarke announces his lineup.
Yeah, I think, and it's always like basically Shea Adams or Lyndon Dykes that plays.
That's it. And it's more likely Shea Adams now because Lyndon Dykes is in the sort of on the wane a little.
Yeah, I mean, but there has been circumstances where it's a game like this, where it's maybe an away game, and he decides he wants a physical presence, and then it is Dykes who turns to. But yeah, I think it's going to be Shea Adams that starts, and like I say, to start the game, Shankland's probably the fourth option, just because he's the last. Same with Scott Bain, as you were saying, he's the last one to come in, and Steve Clarke does have that sort of pecking order. But I think he has got a chance of featuring off the bench if the games go that way where he's required.
I was probably add as well that one of the reasons Shankland was out the Scotland squad is he didn't really take his. I mean, there's a mixture of not being given enough opportunities and then not taking the opportunities when they came, and then obviously he was like completely out of form last season. So yeah, sort of rightfully seems to be down the pecking order just now. You could argue, even if he's sort of outscoring, I mean, possibly all the other strikers put together. Maybe I've seen tweets going about when the Scotland squad was announced, but it can't be far off if that isn't the case. I've got a couple of comments about Shankland before we move on to our final topic. Eyewitness News says Shankland's too clever a player. He doesn't let players smash him. He can hold up great and score from outside the box. If we play with one alone front man, we need someone who will take a chance. I think that's a good point, because I think Shankland might have been played through the middle on his own against Finland, and that was a game where he didn't really grasp that opportunity. But this season, he's really shown how well he can. I mean, he's had a lot of good players around him, let's not forget, but he's really shown how well he can lead the line. And we're talking about Scotland needing somebody potentially with a physical presence. I know he's not like your typical target man or anything like that, but he's shown this season that he can be that number 9 and he can be that sort of focal point of an attack. So if he could replicate the form that he's shown for Hearts this season on the international stage, then he would fill a gap for what Scotland are lacking at the moment.
I mean, I definitely think he can. If, for example, if Steve Clarke was to surprise us and start with Lawrence Shankland as a lone striker tonight, Saturday night, I don't think you would have any concerns about it. You know that he could go into the game and be that number 9, be that sort of lead the line, link play and everything, but also be a goal threat. So he certainly can do it. Obviously, we watch him regularly. We know that. I think some people maybe that don't watch him regularly still pigeonhole him as that sort of just a goal scorer. Mm-hmm. But he's not like that. He's not like, the best example is maybe Chris Boyd. When he played for Scotland, he barely ever started because he couldn't really perform that role at international level. Shankland's not like that. He's very different. He can actually perform that role as well as being a goal threat.
Emperor Craig's got a more pessimistic view, and yes, this is very, very possible. Expect Shankland to get 5 minutes at the end of the game if we're behind a standard from him. I think he means Clarke and Scotland. Clarke just doesn't see off the ball work. Shanks does, and sees him only as a number 9. Right, let's move on to our final topic. We are getting slightly ahead of ourselves, but there will be plenty to discuss between now and when Hearts do play again, and that will be at Pittodrie a week on Sunday, looking to end another long winless run at a venue. I think it was 2016 the last time Hearts won up there, when Derek McInnes was the Aberdeen manager. Craig Halkett, it's going to be a big miss. I think Hearts were trying to sort of manage it in the hope that Craig Halkett wouldn't miss one of the bigger games. It was always going to be difficult with the threshold cut-off still being, the midway cut-off where it resets still being a wee bit away. And I think that's 19 matches. And lots of big games coming up anyway. There's lots of Celtic Rangers on the horizon, things like that. But it is quite a big game to lose Halkett for, who's been like the linchpin of the defence, if you like. Have you got any? I mean, there's lots of different things we can discuss, but let's just, for the sake of argument to begin with, talk about the back four remaining the same, other than Halkett. Who would you earmark to come in? So we've got McEntee, a gap. We've got Findlay, and then we've got Milne. Who comes into that space for Halkett, do you think, as it stands at the moment?
I think probably Steinwender, just because he's played decent minutes. So obviously, if you're looking for somebody just to come straight in at centre half, it's him, Frankie Kent, or Jamie McCart. Frankie Kent's obviously just back from an injury. Jamie McCart had an injury previously and he's been back, but he hasn't played a lot since he's been back. Whereas Steinwender has been coming on quite a lot in games, and McInnes has talked about how much he does like him and trusts him. So I think he's probably the first option for that reason. And again, also because he's right-footed, which would potentially work against Jamie McCart in terms of coming in and partnering. Stuart Finlay would have two left-footers in that case. So I think it probably comes down to, if you're sticking with the back four, Steinwender or Kent. I think Kent seemed to be ahead of Steinwender at the start of the season for a game at centre-back anyway. But I think, as I say, just with the fact that Frankie Kent's just back from his injury and Steinwender has been playing, I think it's probably him if he sticks with the back four.
Yeah, that certainly makes it more difficult. I should, you mentioned McCart there, and I totally wasn't aware of this, but when we put the tweet out that we were going live, somebody responded saying that McCart's two-footed. And I googled it, and he is apparently, according to some sites, he is listed as two-footed. Now he definitely is, prefers his left, but I had no idea. I mean, I still don't know if it's 100% true or not. But
yeah, and just from watching him, it just seems like he's stronger on his left. But
yeah, I thought he was left. I meant, and only seen him play left-sided centre half, both for St Johnstone and for Hearts, whether it's a back three or a back four. So I was under the impression he was a left-footer as well. But yes, another one who hasn't really played many minutes. I think you're right. I think Kent was, excuse me, if Kent was fitter, for want of a better way of putting it, if he hadn't got injured and he had still been on the fringes, then he's the natural replacement to come in, like for like. I think I do wonder, just to kind of move it on a little bit, McEntee, we always knew that this was a bit of a temporary thing, a medium-term temporary arrangement, and I think he's been brilliant. I really think he's been brilliant, but I think the Dundee United game did show you that he can be got at there. And Aberdeen, I believe Aberdeen's best player is Jesper Karlsson, who plays on the left wing. So I wonder whether that is something that McInnes looks at. It could mean McEntee back in midfield. That's something that we'll discuss a bit more next week, because with Benny being out, again, a sort of medium-term thing, does Magnuson keep his place? Does McEntee move in there? There are other options. But again, assuming they stick with a back four, is it too much to change? Steinwender, I think, would be the obvious one. Well, then again, Steinwender, you're then choosing to play somebody who hasn't played much football recently. Borchgrevink with Steinwender inside, or is it a Steinwender right back with Kent at right-sided centre back? Do you think any of those are options?
I mean, I think that there's certainly options. As you sort of hinted at there, it's maybe a bit much to make this. There's both changes on the same side of the back four at the same time. For a game like Aberdeen away, maybe if it was Dundee at home or something, you would maybe be more comfortable doing it. And yeah, Borchgrevink has obviously not played at all really since his injury, and he seems to be behind both Steinwender and McEntee in the pecking order. And he's also more of an attacking fullback. So I just don't know if that's the game to put him in. And again, with somebody who's also just coming in from the cold just inside them. So yeah, I don't think they're out of the question, both those things you've suggested there, but I couldn't see either of them happening. You're maybe going to go on to this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does go to a back three for this game.
Yes. It's exactly what I was going to say next. Yes. I totally agree. Borchgrevink at right back and a four, probably not at the moment. Probably not for a trip to Aberdeen, probably not with Halkett out. And I'm not saying, I don't think that a back three is an option because Hearts need two centre-backs to replace Halkett. I just think it might be, I think he might be forced into it to an extent. And I also think it might be, assuming Aberdeen stick with, Aberdeen have been playing a back three recently. So Aberdeen, after Teelan took over, all the way up until the Scottish Cup final, played a back four, 4-2-3-1. Very, very rarely sort of strayed from that. Changed it for the Scottish Cup final to a back three, ultra defensive, and won that game. Went back to his back four at the start of this season, didn't work again, and then they've gone back to a back three and started getting results again recently. So assuming they stick with that, I wonder whether McInnes thinks match them up and then hope that Hearts, this is quite a sort of rudimentary way of putting it, but just hope Hearts win, like match them up, hope Hearts have the better players and win their individual battles and win the game that way. And then that would mean you could bring Borchgrevink in and it not be, and it's more a natural position for him on the as a right wing back, and then you've got that extra defensive cover as well.
Yeah, I think there's a few factors that are not pointing towards it, but that make the back three attractive. Obviously, that's what the shape Hearts played in the first game of the season when we beat them at Tynecastle. Obviously, I think they didn't play that shape that day, but still could take confidence from the fact that it worked against them on the first day. And then obviously the situation with Halkett, like you say, it's not a necessity to replace him with two other ones, but it just could be a factor in his thinking. To bring probably both Frankie Kent and Steinwender in, or potentially McCart as well, and the Borchgrevink one as well. Like more of a wing back. I think it's just potentially all these things maybe like perfect happening at the same time, is like a perfect storm, and also just the fact that Hearts have obviously get ahead of myself there. Drawn 2 games recently. The form's not been as good, so maybe just a wee change of shape, a refreshing things that might be appealing to him as well. So yeah, I think there's a few factors that might make him think about
that. Michael Robertson said what you said in there. We did beat Aberdeen with a back three. In the first game of the season, Hearts did start the season in a back three. I can't remember exactly how many games, but definitely went to Tannadice and started with a back three.
Yeah, as well. There was quite a few at the start of the season. Yeah.
There was, yeah. And then Bruce MacArthur says, I would like us to put Kingsley at right back and McEntee back in midfield, Spittle at right midfield. That's giving me PTSD from this time last year, just before Naismith was given the bullet. Although I would be much happier to see this now. I think when you've seen the likes of Harry Milne go over to the right of midfield and play well, I think when you've got a much more sort of settled unit and your team's playing with much more confidence, it can carry something like that a bit more. Whereas Hearts were scrambling around looking for answers last season when they put Stephen Kingsley to right back, and Bruce also says Steinwender should be Halkett's replacement for me. And yes, I think we agree that if it's same shape, pretty much the same team, or just a few changes, then I think that's probably going to be the best option to come in. And then just to finish off, Linda Collette says, as long as we win. Yes, exactly. As long as Hearts win. And at the very least, keep this unbeaten run going. It's curious that you had a wee Freudian slip and said defeat there, because it has been... It does feel like a lull at the moment, because it's like Hearts have sort of all that excitement. There's just a wee bit of disappointment, even though in the context of the season it's fine. The draw against Dundee United, just a wee bit of disappointment, and then just this long wait until we get to see Hearts play again.
Yeah, and we're just so good at the moment that draws feel like defeats. That's it.
That's exactly.
I'm actually not one of these. I'm actually one who's sort of glass half full about the 2 draws. I don't think they're anywhere near to being disasters. So I don't know how I slipped myself up with that one.
No, I agree as well. The Dundee United one's more disappointing than the St Mirren one, because even, and again, I'm not predicting for a second that Hearts are going to win the league, but even Rangers and Celtic, when they win the league, they very, very rarely have invincible seasons, or they very, very rarely go a season without dropping points at somewhere like St Mirren or something like that. So overall, in the context of what Hearts are doing, these 2 recent draws have been fine. It's just lots of difficult games coming up in quick succession in the not too distant future. Right, Blair, enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the Scotland games when they come up. Thanks to everybody for joining us. As I say, a little bit of a lull in this sort of international break. There's not been a ton to speak about, but thanks for everybody who got involved. Please give us a wee subscribe if you haven't already, and we will be back next week at some point.